Ever wonder about the staggering numbers you hear on the news? Global debt, trillions of dollars, and what it all means? As of November 15, 2025, global debt has soared past $315 trillion, over 3 times the world's annual economic output. This isn't just one country owing another. It's a complex web connecting governments, banks, and all of us. The US alone carries a national debt of $38 trillion, with Japan not far behind relative to its economy. But who owns this debt? Not just rival nations, but investors, pension funds, banks, and even government agencies. Every year, about $1 trillion in taxpayer money is paid out as interest to these bondholders, a quiet engine transferring wealth from the public to the financial sector. This system didn't appear overnight. It was built over centuries by a handful of visionaries who changed the nature of money and power. To understand why escaping this system seems impossible, we need to look back at its origins. It all began with a clever idea in 17th century England that would change the world. This is the story of how debt became king. Our story starts in 1694. England, desperate for war funds, faced a crisis. Lenders didn't trust kings to repay. Enter William Paterson, a Scottish merchant with a radical proposal. Private investors would lend the government $1.2 million, but the government would never repay the principal, only pay 8% interest forever. This perpetual interest would be funded by new taxes, guaranteed by Parliament. For investors, it was a dream: endless, reliable income. To manage this, the Bank of England was created, a private bank with a public purpose. Investors deposited gold. The bank lent it to the king, and in return, investors received banknotes backed by government promises. These notes became a new kind of asset, secure, interest-earning, and tradable. This was the birth of the national debt as a permanent fixture. The Bank of England could now issue money backed by government debt, not just gold, creating money out of debt. The model was so successful, other nations quickly copied it. Even the young United States, guided by Alexander Hamilton, adopted this system to build its financial foundation. This was the beginning of a new era. Governments could borrow endlessly, and debt became a tool of power. The world would never be the same. Debt had become a permanent part of government finance. For a century, national debt was mostly local. That changed in the 1800s, thanks to the Rothschild family. With banking houses in 5 European cities, the Rothschilds could move money and information faster than governments. Nathan Rothschild in London revolutionized government finance by creating a secondary market for bonds, buying debt at a discount, then selling it to investors. This spread risk and made government debt a tradable commodity. The famous Waterloo story: Nathan used early news of Napoleon's defeat to manipulate the bond market, buying low and selling high, multiplying his fortune. More importantly, he showed the power of a connected international bond market. Now, a government default could trigger a global crisis, not just a local one. Debt became internationally tradable and inescapable. The web was set. Sovereign debt was now a global system. The world's financial fate was tied together by bonds. By the early 1900s, the US was an economic powerhouse, but its financial system was unstable. The Panic of 1907 exposed the need for a central bank. One man, J.P. Morgan, had to personally rescue the system. America's elite realized they needed a permanent solution. In 1910, top bankers and politicians secretly met on Jekyll Island to design a new central banking system. Their plan: create an institution that looked public, but was controlled by private banks. This new system would provide an elastic currency, and crucially, always buy government debt. The blueprint was set for the Federal Reserve. It would stabilize the economy and guarantee a permanent market for government bonds. The era of private bankers controlling public money had begun. The Federal Reserve would soon change everything. Debt was about to become limitless. In 1913, the Federal Reserve Act became law, creating the central bank that still governs the U.S. economy. On paper, it looked decentralized and public, but real power was concentrated in the New York Fed, close to Wall Street. The Fed is a quasi-private entity, owned by the very banks it oversees. Its most revolutionary power: creating money to buy U.S. government bonds, monetizing the debt. When the Treasury borrows, the Fed can simply create new money to buy those bonds. This made the Fed a buyer with a bottomless wallet. Now, there was unlimited demand for U.S. government debt. Before the Fed, borrowing was limited by what private investors would lend. Now, that limit was gone. The government could borrow endlessly, knowing the Fed would always step in. This mechanism unlocked the door to today's multi-trillion-dollar national debt. The U.S. gained a license to borrow on a scale never seen before. The debt machine was now unstoppable. The world's financial system would never be the same. Debt was no longer a tool, it was the engine. The age of infinite borrowing had arrived. By the late 1970s, the U.S. faced runaway inflation. Enter Paul Volcker, new Fed chairman, who hiked interest rates to 20%, the Volcker shock. Inflation was crushed, but the shockwaves hit developing nations hard. Many had borrowed heavily in U.S. dollars at low rates. Suddenly, their interest payments skyrocketed. Countries like Mexico and Brazil were trapped. Their revenues were in local currency, but their debts were in expensive dollars. In 1982, Mexico nearly defaulted, threatening U.S. banks. The solution? The IMF stepped in, not to help countries but to bail out Western banks. New loans were given, not for development, but to keep interest payments flowing to creditors. The debt trap was set. Countries borrowed more just to pay interest. The system was now a weapon. Debt enforced global control. The world's poorest paid the price for the richest banks' survival. Debt had become a tool of power, not progress. The 1982 crisis created a new template. IMF loans with strict conditions, structural adjustment. Countries had to cut public spending, privatize industries, and open up to foreign investors. Economic sovereignty was traded for bailout money. The debt trap became permanent. New loans paid old interest, pushing debt further into the future. The goal wasn't repayment, but perpetual servitude, ensuring a constant flow of money from poor to rich nations. This pattern repeated: Argentina in 2001, Greece in the Euro crisis, Sri Lanka and Zambia today. Debt became a tool for creditor nations to dictate policy from afar. Resources and labor in debtor countries were redirected to service foreign debt, often at the expense of their own people. The system designed centuries ago was now fully weaponized. Debt was no longer just finance, it was global control. With trillions in government debt worldwide, who actually owns it? Take the U.S. debt. It's split between intragovernmental holdings, like Social Security trust funds, and the public. Intragovernmental debt is the government owing itself, using surplus taxes to buy special treasury bonds. The larger share is held by the public foreign governments, central banks, the Federal Reserve, and American institutions. Pension funds, insurance companies, mutual funds, banks, and asset managers like BlackRock and Vanguard all own U.S. bonds. Every year, nearly $1 trillion in tax revenue is paid as interest to these bondholders. Your tax dollars flow to pension funds, banks, foreign governments, and wealthy investors. It's a massive, quiet transfer of wealth from taxpayers to the holders of capital. The system ensures the rich get richer, by design. Debt isn't just a burden, it's a pipeline for wealth. The cycle continues, year after year. Why not just pay off the debt? The truth: the system is designed so this can never happen. In our debt-based system, money is created when debt is created. The dollars in your pocket represent a slice of national debt. Paying off the debt would mean destroying the money supply. If the government tried to pay back $38 trillion, it would suck that money out of the economy, causing a catastrophic depression. There'd be no money for goods, investment, or lending. The global economy would grind to a halt. So, the system is trapped in perpetual borrowing. Old bonds are paid off with new ones, often borrowing even more. This is the ultimate triumph of the forever debt system. The machine must keep growing. Debt can never be paid off, only managed and expanded. We're not just borrowing from the future, we're borrowing to pay for the past. The only solution to too much debt? More debt. The cycle is endless and inescapable.